All right, all right, all right. Welcome everybody to another episode of This Week in the CBL. All about our collegiate baseball league. If you're stumbling upon the channel and don't know, it's our 128 team fantasy baseball league. Kind of I guess you might say it's a contract league, and it's very much themed like college athletics. So glad to be here tonight, joined by Ram and JC once again. Looks like Chris is going to try to join us, but he said he's having some technical difficulties. So hopefully Chris can get that figured out, and then we'll have him here in a little bit. But how you guys doing tonight? How you doing, Ram, JC?
I'm doing great, man. I cannot complain. Things are good. Excited to be back on the podcast. This is my second time, so I'm looking forward to another great night of discussing baseball and talking about what's going on in the league, because we have had a chaotic week in this league, to say the least.
We have had some drama. How about you, Ram?
I'm excited. I see we got some hellos already. Record 60 seconds into the opening here from our guys. So this is looking like it's already shaping up to be fun. I can imagine there's a lot to discuss, even if just on the trade side tonight. So I'm excited to get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yogurt Spit says that this is exhilarating. I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to see where his Kansas State Wildcats are ranked in the updated top 25, which we will get to here in a little bit. But we'll start off just how did you guys' weeks go last week? My team, the Louisville Cardinals were really struggling last week. Tuesday and Wednesday combined, I scored 18 points. I dropped a game to the league average. I was able to beat my opponent. But I dropped my game to the league average by about 3 points as well. So that was kind of a bummer. I've had both of my losses now. One in week one to my opponent. I lost that game by 4 or 5 points, and then I lost to the league average this week by a few points. So it's kind of a bummer. I could be sitting at 10-0 with the other guys that are undefeated, but unfortunately, that's the way the breaks go. How'd you guys' teams go this week?
Well, I'll start by saying I beat league average by 2.2 points. So that one came down to the final outs of the final game, where I was sitting there worried about that. And I wound up beating Temple by a little bit as well. Two pretty close matchups for me, but I managed to pull out a 2-0, and this was definitely my worst week of the season, my closest battle with league average for sure. But I managed to go 2-0, so I'm 9-1. I'm not too mad about that. I feel like, all things considered, last week was a terrible week for my pitching. They were not good, and I managed to go 2-0, so I was happy with that.
Peter says, I'll tell you whose team did not struggle. Once again this week, Dallas Baptist did not struggle off to the 10-0 start, and also advanced in the Buttermaker Memorial Cup. But they actually are in a little bit of a dogfight right now, as they are trailing as of this moment on Tuesday. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the week plays out. Ram, how did you do last week?
I finished up a nice clean 2-0. It felt like it was one of those where I got saddled with an easier opponent, though, because I had New Hampshire. They only put up 483. So I'll take that one as a blessing in this case, because most weeks I was getting guys who were running up having their career moments. And I know Peter's itching to talk about his team. That's why he mentioned I'll tell you whose team didn't struggle, because we probably saw the biggest upset so far of a team ranked in the triple digits taking down an undefeated team. He took that 0 down like it was the New York Giants against the Patriots. So we'll see. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But it was a bit of an interesting week. As JC mentions, he has one of the stronger teams, and even he struggled this week. So one of the fun things I noticed is that some of these guys, they struggle at the same time because they roster similar players. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the cases of, like, that Rutgers upset. They roster completely different players than some of the rest of the league. So when they're spiking, the other teams are not. We'll see how that happens when conference tournament comes around, because we might see some more upsets than we think.
I have to say, who did not struggle is Yogurt Spit's Kansas State. I got whooped in the Buttermaker Cup by Kansas State by like it was close too. Going into Saturday, I think it was Saturday midday-ish. We're about tied, fighting with league average. I was like, I might have a chance. Got waxed the last day and a half of the week. So his Kansas State Wildcats unfortunately took me out of the running of the Buttermaker Memorial Cup.
Yeah, I got knocked out as well. Santa Clara knocked my Cardinals out this week. I did not score very well. Santa Clara has been a pretty good team in the top fringe top 10 team all year. So that was no shame in losing that one. But it's a good segue into the Buttermaker Memorial Cup. Guys, we have an outstanding battle. We're down to 16 teams left in the Buttermaker Memorial Cup. And I'll just put it on screen here, and we'll check it out. But we have in the Sweet 16 here, Dallas Baptist facing Butler. So that's two really, really top-notch teams in this Sweet 16. Probably could be a final round matchup in the regular league. So any thoughts on the Buttermaker on some of these other matchups? Any matchups stand out to you guys?
Well, I'll tell you, Rhode Island got snake bit, man, because Rhode Island ran into the buzzsaw that is Dallas Baptist. I mean, 8-19 is no joke. He actually outdid Butler in his own conference, right? And just think about that Rhode Island sitting there facing Dallas Baptist, he would have beaten a lot of these other teams here. And so I got to pick up for my guy in the conference there, because that was a strong enough score to move on. And you got to think that's just rough matchmaking to run into the favorite of the tournament that early. Still put up a good score, but nobody was touching, what was that, 1,200 from DBU this week?
Yeah, it was 1,200. It was a pretty good output there. I believe that the ACC still has one team remaining. The Clemson Tigers advanced. They beat their opponent by almost 200 points, about 180 points there in the round of 32 to get to that Sweet 16. And they've got an uphill battle against Columbia, a battle of two what has been top 25 teams most of the season. So that'll be an interesting matchup. I guess when you get to this point of the year, though, most of these matchups are going to be pretty good in the Buttermaker.
They definitely are. And I'm checking right now to see what Long Beach State is doing this week, because Long Beach State UCLA is one that catches my eyes here as two teams who have really been playing well, like for the majority of the year. Two teams that I think sometimes go a little under the radar when it comes to discussing some of the top teams in this nation. Both teams that have definitely stood out to me at times. And that's an interesting matchup there, because both of them played pretty good last week. I mean, 772 for Long Beach State and 886 for UCLA. But both of those teams are kind of hovering relatively close to league average right now. Again, we're only a day and a half into this week, but certainly interested to see how that matchup goes. And we're going to have Elite Eight next week? I mean, we're getting down to it at this point.
Yeah, we're getting down to it. Yeah. It's definitely some good matchups. FIU playing Oregon. Oregon was a top 25 team for the first, 2 or 3 weeks of the season before kind of getting snake bit in recent weeks. Marshall and Northern Colorado have both put up a lot of points in recent weeks. Last week, Marshall with 904 and Northern Colorado with 996. So that'll be a pretty interesting matchup. Mississippi State is an interesting squad because overall they've put up quite a few points on the season. Last week they kind of got lucky against Indiana State in the Buttermaker, but Mississippi State and Cal could be a really good matchup. Two prolific scoring teams. And there was another one down here, Kansas State and USC. This is two top 20 teams in the nation going to battle here in this round of 16. USC last week scored 841 points. Kansas State 852. So if that had been this round, that would have been really close.
That's one that could definitely come down to the wire as well. I mean, yeah, it looks like for the most part, the cream rises to the top in something like this, as you would expect. And we have some of the best teams in the nation most of the best teams in the nation, I would say, really, honestly, are featured. If you're in the final 16 of the Buttermaker, there's generally going to be a pretty good correlation to your overall record and your placement in that top 25.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the Cinderella squad, the Florida State Seminoles, had made it to the round of 32. So I was really interested in tracking that game, that Buttermaker matchup last week, because they are now 0-10 in the regular season on Fantrax. But however, they had won 2 games in the Buttermaker and advanced to the round of 32. So Cinderella's slipper is no more, and TCU was able to squeak out a win over Florida State by about 160 points, something like that. And TCU's been a pretty good squad all year and facing Santa Clara in the round of 16. So it'll be interesting to see where these go. Let's see here. Post some comments in the chat. Peter says, Ram, I knew you were brave enough to talk about the Scarlet Knights. Yogurt Spit, true story. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. But then he also says, FAU's heavy hitting teams. So I was nervous. I guess you guys played each other recently?
You're
in the
Cup last week.
Buttermaker.
Oh, in the
Yeah, that
Buttermaker.
was
Okay, I was trying to figure that out because
snuck
different
by.
conference.
He snuck by JC in the Buttermaker right there. We glossed over it.
He didn't sneak by. He whooped me the last couple of days. Honestly, it was like a 200-point battle. Not much of a battle at that point.
But I think, but to your credit, and as to what you were saying, I do think every remaining team here, if not ranked right now, was ranked at one point. You know, you guys mentioned Long Beach State, and they're not ranked right now, but they were ranked at one point. And I think everybody remaining is now somebody that had seen that top 25 ranking at some point or another. Obviously, if I'm wrong, you guys can correct me, but it looks like as you were saying, the Cinderella stories have quieted down. And this is where we're at, and this is a tournament of consistency. You know, this is actually all my jokes about what the real reward of this tournament is. You got to think about the bragging rights that come from the Buttermaker in the sense of the fact that you can't get lucky 4 weeks in a row necessarily. You've got to keep that consistency going. So I think that at least the winner of this, whether it be DBU or somebody else, is going to have something to talk about the consistency of their team and what they've put together.
Yeah,
Totally
absolutely.
agree.
Yeah, most of these teams remaining are pretty good in the Buttermaker. Also, Jim says, hello from 3-7 land. Don't get discouraged, Jim. I know you're still trying to improve your team, retool it for next year. So no shame in that. We've all been there at times in different leagues. So don't worry about that. I do want to touch base on the standings here because we had quite a bit of discussion in the Discord today about some mentioning that the only teams that are having success are teams that are basically trading a lot. And I kind of wanted to debunk that myth per se, because I just pulled up the overall standings in point order. And you've got, yes, Dallas Baptist, who made a lot of trades early. They're leading the way, in points on the season. But right there at number 2, the Butler Bulldogs, they're not a team that has gone out there and made a significant number of trades. They've made some, but they're not a team that's been wheeling and dealing kind of at the same level as a Florida International or a Dallas Baptist. And then in that top 10, you've also got Cal has not made a significant number of trades. He's made some, but you've got Cal right there, Santa Clara, Baylor. These are all teams here in this top 10 in points that have not made a significant number of trades. They've made some, but I think it's fair to say that you can be successful in the league without necessarily making a significant number of trades too, if you set your roster up appropriately. And here, I'll share my screen so we can have the standings on screen.
Yeah,
All right, here we go.
That, I'll mention something that I talked about last week in the Discord, but I didn't get to talk about on the show. There are 4 10-0 teams remaining, but each of them respond to their own division, their own conferences, and they have not faced each other yet. So we can only have at max out of 128 2 undefeated teams in the entire nation. We cannot have more than 2, and we may not have even that. So we've started to see those little losses creep up on people, whether it be the league average or a team overperforming their expectations for the week. But we're seeing that cream to the crop rise, to steal that phrase from JC there. Like, it's starting to show. There's only 4 undefeated teams left, and they're going to have a tough road to keeping it, because even DBU, I mean, look, they're ahead of scoring by everybody. I'm sorry. Dallas Baptist University, they're ahead of scoring on everybody, but it's not a completely insurmountable thing to think that maybe they'll beat the league average every single week. But there might be somebody that outscores them, and they've been close to the top of every week, but weirder things have happened. And like I said, it comes from their own conference, the best competition to them, a matchup they have yet to have. So I am very interested to see those matchups when they have to run head-to-head with each other.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, just to piggyback off of what Ash said real quickly, I think he makes a great point talking about trades, because y'all know me, or if y'all don't know me, I make a lot of trades. I've probably been one of the more active in the trade market in this league. Obviously, Chris, who's on here pretty much every week, has made a ton of trades. A lot of people who are super active in the trade group that are up here towards the top of these standings. Teams like DBU, who was super active. Obviously, Chris in Florida International. Rhode Island is always looking for trades. And you can go on. There's several other teams that fit that mold. But then again, I would say just as many, if not more, the Butlers and Santa Claras and Cal, who's made a few trades here and there that have been like fine-tuning the roster. Northern Colorado, UCLA, like all these teams, they may have made a trade here, trade there, but a lot of these teams have made 3, 4, 5 trades and have really competitive rosters. And I think that's a testament to the viability of different strategies in this league. I mean, I was reaching out to TCU before the season started talking about, I forget who the player was, but I was reaching out to him specifically about a guy on his team. And he was like, I feel comfortable about the way that I built my roster. I want to stick with it until the season starts. And like, I think there's definitely a viability to different strategies, especially in a league like this where there's so much variance with so many different teams. And I think that the standings really do a good job of representing that right now, in all honesty. If you have a strategy and you're confident in your strategy and you're making smart moves and not getting screwed by injuries, definitely a lot of different things can work.
Yeah.
I'll
be honest with you. Go ahead, Ash.
Go ahead, Ram. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I got to be honest with you. I don't agree with the two of you at all. I'm with the consensus in the Discord. Because the idea here is if I sit here and I'm like, okay, like I drafted a team that I liked and I didn't want to trade. But what happened when my division made 400 trades? What am I supposed to do? Sit there and be like, you know what? It's fine. I love my roster. No, you got to trade in this league, baby. You got to trade in this league. I completely disagree with that. Yeah, there's some people that benefited from like Yogurt Spit mentions right here in the comments, right? I'm 10-0 and I made 3 trades. And it's good, right? But it's the idea of, if you draft a roster and it doesn't work out, your only way out is trading. And you have in a league like this, the most
that's true in every league, though.
To trade. But you have what other leagues do you have where you can trade with 120 people?
Well, you
know
don't.
What I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. Like in this league, if you're choosing not to trade, you are putting yourself at a deficit because you have a better opportunity to build up more than any place else in the world.
I just pulled up the history. Butler has made 0 trades.
Yeah. Right, because they haven't talked to any about that stuff. But DBU is by far had the favorite to everybody, right? And how many trades has DBU made, Ash?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't have them pulled up.
A lot.
I'll look it up. You guys talk.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like in terms of like, and if you built a good roster, you obviously don't want to trade out of it necessarily. But I think at the end of the day, like you're gonna be rewarded for taking risks in this league, and I think that comes with these trades. Like there are some teams that could be better off. Look, I didn't draft Jordan. I traded and got Jordan, right? If Jordan was performing like Judge was, I'd look a hell of a lot different right now, just on that single maneuver alone, right? So you've had some teams that have looked completely different day and night by maybe 1 or 2 trades alone. Like if you replaced Judge with Jordan on my squad and you look at the way that they perform week to week, I would not have a loss on my record right now. And that's 1 out of the 60 or 70 trades I've made. So when it's like, Yogurt Spit mentions I made like 3 trades, right? That could be the trade that made you 10-0 instead of 8-2 or 6-4 right now, in my opinion. So I firmly disagree. I think this is a league where if you've got 128 people in this league in terms of teams, take advantage of the opportunity and trade. Because if you don't, someone in your conference will, and they will leapfrog you even if you're confident. And I feel like JC can speak to that because you and Chris are kind of in a trade war every other week. And I see it.
Well, here's my thought. Here's my thought process. Honestly, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I don't think it's quite as black and white as you say, because it is extremely crucial about what you said towards the beginning of what you said, which is where I keep saying you said, I apologize, but where you said that if your roster isn't working out, the only way to make up for that is to trade. Yes, that's true in every league. Yes, that's even more true in a league like this with this many teams. At the same time, that is very dependent on whether or not your roster has worked out. If you drafted well and did well, I don't think trading is a necessity, but I will agree that I think there's a difference between trading to trade and trading with a specific goal in mind. And I do think there are different examples of that in this league that not going to name names, of course, but there are people who are trading because, that's what you do in fantasy baseball. That's what I do is I trade. And then
I've been known to make a board trade.
I have too, to be totally honest. I mean, that's not calling anybody out, but there are also clearly people who have a specific goal in mind with the trades that they are making. And I think you can be that person without making 60 trades. I think you can be that person having made 6 trades so far this season. I am in agreement. In all likelihood, if you aren't making any moves at all and aren't looking to improve your roster either for the now or for the future in a smart way, you're not going to really go anywhere. Sitting in the middle and not doing anything isn't a great way to really accomplish something the vast majority of the time. I agree with that, but I think there's a balance. I don't think that it's you have to trade every single day. You have to be making a trade and figuring out how to make your roster better every single day. There's certainly a balance there. So it's just, you know what I mean?
No,
this
I get it.
topic's
I mean,
brought up a lot of
ahead.
conversation in the chat. So I have dropped the StreamYard link. So if somebody wants to call in and give a take on this topic, please do so. I'd love to hear from some of you. We have a lot of comments going in our chat, and I'll bring those up here in a second. But Ram, finish your point.
Yeah, I just think it's also it puts you in a position where you have to be at least at the ready, though, right? Because if you sit there, this is the league where, and we've talked about this before, Ash and I both publicly and in our own conversations, right? That you have so much opportunity. Fantasy baseball is fun, but you also want to get some money out of it, right? So when you think about the idea of how you can make money in this league, there's so many opportunities. You can do it out of the NIT. Right, you don't even have to be
NIT pays out $50,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things like, oh, you want to cover your entry for next year and treat this like a pet project and have a little fun because this league makes no sense. You could do it out of the NIT. So for me, it's just the idea of understanding that there is, based on payout and based on the access to people in this league, the most opportunity and the most incentive to be an active trader, I think. Because even if you want to say, I'm not even in it for the money, I want to rebuild, then go talk to the 50 teams that are trying to move to the conference right now. You have an opportunity to talk to 50 different people, you know, and I've had literal moves where somebody, like I had this come up with, I moved Yu Darvish for Eric Wagaman a couple of weeks ago. And I had a conversation with one owner who had Eric Wagaman and I had Darvish, and I said, listen, I'll do that 1-for-1. He says, no, I don't want that. 5 minutes later, I had another team owner with the same ask. I shot the same trade over. I got the trade done. And it was really funny because it was like there was literally within 5 to 6 minutes of okay, this is fine, I'll figure it out, and then I got the exact deal I wanted. It's there. Activity, I think, is rewarded in this league because, to your credit, JC, obviously, if you've drafted a team that's doing really good, you don't need to trade out of it just to trade because that could work against you, right? You could get a little too excited and that doesn't help. But what happens if you said, oh, I'm going to stand pat, and then you're looking ahead to the conference tournaments, you're looking ahead to what might be the Sweet 16, and you think, okay, 13 out of those 16 have made trades to upgrade their team. I stand pat, I lose because I didn't make that deal. Activity's got to be rewarded in this league. And again, financially and in terms of your ability to get the players you want, 8 copies, 128 teams, you have no better league to make the team exactly the image that you want. So I think that's why I'm still like, I don't want to, let's not give too credit. And some of these guys who have drafted teams and haven't traded, thank God some players have worked out, you know, because certain things of, did we expect Nick Pivetta to be a super all-star? Suzuki had a hot start. PCA was setting the world on fire. Tyler Mahle was dominating. Clay Holmes has got over 200 points. You looked at those teams going in and you weren't thinking, oh, top 25 Scott. Yeah, led by Tyler Mahle and Clay Holmes, definitely, you know? And you weren't thinking Jordan was going to be a deficit to teams. You didn't think Casas was going to go on the IL and essentially be negative for the year. So we might have all drafted well in our own ways, but you got to react to what's going on because I'm granted, I'm not saying ship Jordan out for nothing. Please to God, don't. I'm not saying trade Vlad for nothing. I know that would never happen in this league or anywhere
never.
else.
Of course not.
I'm not saying, you know, make those trades for a super cheap Vlad, as Kenny is mentioning. Yeah, it's I'll have a lot of commentary on the trade stuff later. I'm wondering if that, and I know Chris is worried to deal with me on the trade part of the show.
I don't believe that. Maybe we'll see. I feel like Jordan for Baz would be a pretty tame trade, honestly, at this point.
I sent Chris down a message and asked him. I was like, "Listen, if you're afraid for the trade segment, be afraid. We're gonna talk." But
well, we haven't got there now. We haven't got there now, and he's not on. So give your take on the trade. I mean, I think everybody in the league wants to hear. Give your take.
In terms of that trade, and like
I don't
how
have
ridiculous.
That trade in the lineup. I don't have that three-team trade in the lineup specifically because I didn't want to put Chris on that spot again, which we just did last week.
I love putting Chris
he's not
on that spot.
We don't have that
put
rotation,
JC on that.
Give it.
Yeah, I'd put JC on that spot. JC would put me on that spot. I think that's the gamesmanship of the league, right? We've got to sit there and
I
I've
think that's
messed
just
with
part
JC.
of it. I'm going to be totally.
Yeah,
I mean, well, I did the whole
think,
Shane Boz for Zach Wheeler and more, and like that trade was like a big deal too. So like that's how it goes. I mean, Mark was on this podcast that week as well.
I love that you jump on because, in the first weeks I was throwing shots at you and talking about your trading and stuff like that. But again, and you can tell, I think at this point, you know me. This is not any kind of animosity thing. I respect you. No. I think you're doing great at the game, right? So, but I think that's the gamesmanship. Like, I want Chris to be on here. Mark is commenting there. Y'all put me on that spot. Yeah, I went out there and I said, Mark, your wife must be the luckiest person on the planet because you are such a giving dude, man. I'm not gonna sit here and I complimented your wife, Mark. I did not call out your wife. I complimented her and said I'm glad for her that she's got such a giving human being in her life because you were so willing to do it for a stranger. But I assume for your wife, you're willing to go to the moon and back. So I'm grateful for you all. But no, in terms of the Chris trade, I mean, that's or the Vlad trade, right? Like, and I might bring it up in a second because first off, I will say kudos to the fact that we've all decided we can do 4 and 5 team deals now. I love that you all are trying to break fan tracks because I think it's hilarious that like even just watching the layout of like who's trading this and things like that. It's been. I saw something from Mike in the comments about the trade.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let's finish this topic first.
But let's.
Okay. I have some comments on that myself.
So basically, the trade kind of, in my mind, breaks down to along the lines of Vlad plus Riley Green plus freshman Evan Carter plus more going out from Northwestern, and then Willier Abreu and Tanner Hawk, who debatable how we feel about him, and then a bunch of guys that I'm not totally 100% confident I trust as being like everyday contributors now or in the future, like possibility guys for sure, but a lot of like, I don't know. There was a lot given up and not a ton, in my opinion, in return in that league, and that was in that trade, and that. I just don't totally understand the thought process. That's all I'll say.
Kenny says nothing, guys. It's a poop sandwich return.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how it looks.
I've talked about this before. I do not understand the urgency for moving somebody like this right now for a bunch of, to steal the term from JT, mystery boxes, right? I mean, I make this joke over and over ad nauseum in the Discord where it's like, oh, Vlad was traded for prospects. Well, maybe the prospects might turn out to be Vlad. You'll be fine. And it's like, no, that's the point is to have. And so it frustrates me, I guess, too, because when it comes down to it, I don't, what Kenny said, for someone who makes their opinions explicit like Chris, make him pay. Yeah, I'd love to. And this is not a thing where I've talked about this before when Chris has been on the pod. I don't expect anyone to come in here if I feel like they won the deal, and I don't need you to downplay. This is something I used to mess with JC about too, where it's like, oh, I'm taking on a lot of risk. I'm like, shut the hell up. Don't give me that. Oh, I'm taking on the risk in this situation. Like, yeah, it's true. Somebody can pull out a gun and shoot Vlad Guerrero tomorrow. You're right. In that case, Chris is taking on all the risk in the world, because
let's knock on wood that doesn't happen.
No, I would never hope for any of that, especially because I love Vlad Guerrero Jr. too, and that's one of those things where I feel like there have been quite a few trades. And this is not the only one. So it's not like I can sit here and say this is the only trade that I feel has been lopsided in a situation. And Andrew Penn State commented something that I was just about to touch on. Trades like that hurt player value too. I agree with that 100%. That's my issue, where we started with a lot of these deals where certain players, I feel like, got traded at a discount when there was no need, there was no pressure. And I don't necessarily understand it because unless you're getting your favorite thing in the world, I think it's a situation where you are hurting player value for people. It's kind of a buyer's market right now. which is crazy, right? Because with all the people buying, you would think that people would be able to drive up the price economically if we're just talking about value here, right? Everybody right now, if you don't have a Vlad, if you're competing, would love a Vlad. So it feels like it's easy enough to say, hey, like the fleece-free period made it clear we can get really good value for players. And there's nothing in the Constitution that doesn't say, hey, I like your offer. I'm going to go to the league and see if somebody beats that, but I'll give you a chance to get it back. Like, you can negotiate creatively in this league. There are people who will message you over nothing. I've got multiple messages over selling Angel Martinez for Fab. So I feel like maybe it's the process where I almost want to coach some people through it and say, listen, feel comfortable asking other owners for advice. Feel comfortable challenging that owner and saying, is that the best you got? That's not enough to make me move a sophomore Vlad. And if you're worried about value, this is not a like
feel comfortable saying no. Just feel comfortable
like,
saying no.
I don't want anybody to ever feel like I'm insulting your intelligence. I know that that's a tough brand here because like sometimes when you look at a trade and you're like, wow, that guy got fleeced. Inherently what you're saying is, man, that guy's an idiot. And it comes off that way. Like, we're not trying to say that, but it comes off where people can internalize that and say, oh, you think I'm an idiot. You think I don't know baseball. You think I don't know players. And we get into debates about rankings and stuff like that. But objectively, there has been a lot of hurt player value. There has been a lot of superstars.
Put Kenny's comment on screen.
I'll do it. There's a lot. I love you, Kenny. I am so sorry. But no, it's one of those, and the part of the lore behind that. Mike says it here. It's been said, but I don't think some owners understand 4-year max. I think these rookies will be around 10 years. Yes. Is there a benefit to the fact that you can renew the rookie contract? Absolutely. But we've seen now a history of rookies struggling off the bat. So if you're missing up to a whole first year of that rookie year, maybe you got 3 years of somebody that you hope to hit what somebody is already doing. And I get the gambling in that. Look, I'm a person who does that in real life. But it's just one of those things where we need to be a little bit more open about what player value is and realize that in this league somehow it has tanked. It is a buyer's market. And I don't know how that changes when we've got stuff like this. Was a multi-team deal. And everyone accepted that along the way. Everyone saw this happening and said, okay, cool. This is the price for Vlad. We're not going in and like infringing on that. Almost too nice to each other. But it's a lot. It's a lot. I can't wrap my head around it. Chris is a guy I've come to consider a friend. So I'm happy in the sense of like, okay, good for you if you're succeeding. But I give him the same lip I gave DBU lip for weeks too, where I respect him as a fantasy baseball player. But some of those trades, as JC said very nicely, I do not understand the thought process behind it.
I've also come to know Chris as a friend. He is also one of my biggest competition for sure to win the American. That trade does not make things easier. Let's just put it that way, to try to do that, which of course is his goal as a team who's kind of all in. But at the end of the day, I don't know how you if you're trading a guy like Vlad Guerrero for lottery tickets, it should be lottery tickets like Roman Anthony or Leo DeVries or like some of the top prospect names in all of the sport. The guys who there's no such thing as a can't miss, but the guys who are considered can't miss level prospects. That's the type of player that you should be getting in return. And I just don't see that caliber of value in this move, but also in a good amount of the moves that we've seen for some of these sophomore superstars.
I see Ben, by the way, is mentioning, I think the point of trading, like, sophomore Ohtani or Vlad for what you got back is no one will ever be them. But if 2 or 3 of them are Vlad or Ohtani, I'm coming out positive. Right. But when you traded Ohtani, right? And yes. You got back what? Walcott, Lawler, Vlad, and Amador. So I did not have a problem with that return.
You got a lot. Exactly. He got a lot better return.
If you're telling me that you getting that return, for me, that doesn't trigger that where I say, oh, there's no urgency to move it. I'm like, okay, you've decided you want to rebuild. You got some guys you want to rebuild around. I think that's fine. Vlad, a freshman Lawler, a freshman Walcott, and then I think it was like a sophomore Amador. I'm not an Amador guy, but in terms of quality of that return, I get your logic, Ben. I see what you're saying because, yeah, let's say that Vlad Guerrero produces 75% of what Ohtani does, hypothetically estimating low, right? And then you've got Walcott and Lawler, Walcott's a high-end lottery ticket, as JC said. That's not your off the top 100 board. Walcott's considered in some places the top prospect in baseball, right? And then Lawler was looking hot. The Diamondbacks are developing, hitting well. You got a freshman there. You think you could get good value out of that? Yeah, that could exceed Ohtani's value. I did not have a problem with your trade. The idea here, when I look at the Vlad return, is it was a lot of pieces that were either available on the waiver wire. You could get people on the waiver wire that were outperforming some of these guys, and there might be some name value to it, and nothing concrete. I mean, as JC pointed out, and I don't have it right in front of me because it was a lot of teams, but I mean, the primary return was basically Wilyer Abreu, right? I mean, it turns out. And
none
also,
of the
Riley
names here
Green
are and a freshman Evan Carter, who people find valuable as well. So,
yes, I like Evan Carter. I understand he's got lesser value, but you're right about what you just said there. People are, and then Ben mentions I traded Vlad for Painter, Doyle, and Tiedemann. You know, I'm not a big Doyle guy, but I get your thought process there.
Yeah.
You know, Painter and like if you like Doyle. That's horrible. Yeah, I don't get why people trade away top prospects for top players on sophomore contracts for two players. I feel like I look at this league a lot in points value. I don't really care about the names. If anybody looks at UConn's relievers, I've moved out a lot of the pretty names. I've got random dudes over there, but they're performing, right? And I'll move off value if I need to. I've moved off some value for getting more years out of my guys, because I realize the teams are better than me this year, but maybe next year I can build on it and kind of sneak one by. Right? Like those, it's sort of like what JC was saying. Trade with a purpose if you're trading, right? Figure it out. Like if I'm deciding, hey, I think I got a small little extra here, this surplus, I can move that to get 2 or 3 more years out of my guys. I'll make that move there. I'll take that calculated risk. But I'm still competing. I'm not selling off. And because I want to try to at least sneak by my conference tournament or something. We'll figure it out. But it's just a tough one where it's just what's leading into my head now of what I was saying before. If you watch somebody, and JC, you'd be the best qualified to speak on this, right? You sometimes have to trade in response, right? Because now you watch probably your biggest competition just load up and get Vlad, right? And this is a guy who might be, we'll talk about it, but I think he might be ahead of you in the top 25 too. And that's just user opinion, of course, but that's your competition right there, right? Like I speak for myself. Rhode Island and Butler are in my division. Butler hasn't traded at all because they've got the blessings of a PCA, you know, credit to you, Mark, out there, because I said that he was terrible and he decided to make me look like an idiot and that kind of stuff. But Rhode Island makes deals and I sit there and I'm like, damn, Rhode Island's my direct competition. And I haven't faced them yet too. I want to beat them. I want to take the 0 from them. I'm going to want to make a deal if I'm facing against them. I've seen guys talk about midweek, hey, trading for this starter because he's starting tonight, right? Because they want to sneak in that extra start. Like these things happen. But if I had to give an honest, like short opinion on it, I do agree a lot with what PSU Andrew said a little earlier, that I do think it tanks player value, and I don't like that because I feel like you should have an opportunity to compete. And if you want to rebuild in this league, I think that's fine. I'm okay with you having that direction, but you should have an opportunity to hold fast on that and think, okay, I can value my sophomore star and get back. Like Ben said, give me a Vlad, give me a Walcott, give me a Lawler. Let's talk about real potential value down the line, not necessarily, you know, I don't have it in front of me again because I keep trying to find it. I'm like, Jesus, this is an adventure to look through. But Wilyer, I mean, and Green is gone. Kurtz is gone. I'm a big Kurtz guy too.
I think it was a junior Kurtz.
Like, it was a junior
Kurtz. It's a junior Kurtz and a junior Riley Green. So I know there's limitations there. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, Montes got sent out from, if you just look at it in a microcosm here, you've got Chris is sent out. Huck is a negative to some teams. Montes is a bit of a mystery box in his own way because he hasn't even pitched with the Mets yet, and he's still hurt. Abreu, I like Starlin Caba, but even then, there's a lack of power. This league does prefer power hitters on the side. Weissert, Janek, Barrera, those are low-end mystery boxes. Those are not your Leo DeVries's, Roman Anthony's, Walcotts of the world. So, I mean, kudos to that situation there for turning into like good deal for you in that regard. You bolstered up your team. You can only trade with what's the offer in front of you. But it's a tough one. I can understand why some people in the league at least feel like if they're not trading, they're kind of screwed out, because if you watch teams benefit for very little and you're like, that's my competition, I guess I need to get into the ring, it gets hard, right? Because I was feeling that way for a long time too, where I looked at it and I was like, I feel like I haven't had a trade that I won definitively all year. And it's frustrating me to watch some teams go along. I'm like, what did you tell these guys to get them to move you Betts and Freeman for cents on the dollar, right? Like, it's just a tough one.
I think really the final thing to add is that if you are a rebuilding team or somebody who isn't in a position to contend right now, I think the biggest thing to remember is that unless we're talking about seniors, if we're talking about seniors, it's maybe a little bit different. But if we're not talking about senior guys on your roster, you have time. You don't have to make a deal today. You don't have to make a deal tomorrow. You don't have to do it this week. You don't have to do it this month. Vlad hasn't hit great this year by Vlad standards. That's a guy who very likely will start to hit, and all it takes is a 2-week stretch for him. All of a sudden, he pops 4 home runs and goes crazy for 2 weeks, and it's like, oh, yeah, now he's averaging 6.5 points a game. All of a sudden, your value, because people care so much about the points right now, which is understandable, but is also, I think, very short-sighted, and I think we see that sometimes. And it's like, if you are in a position where you are rebuilding and you have guys who have consensus name value, especially, and they're not senior contracts, you don't have to be in a rush to move them. If they're on senior contracts, I would start rushing, because the trade deadline's only about a month and a half away. But outside of that, I think you got to be patient if you're in that rebuilding situation, because otherwise you put yourself in a spot where very possibly you get fleeced and all of a sudden you're rebuilding without as much in the cupboard.
Ben says, unless you're in fleece free, then take a deal and let everyone roast you, but drive the price up. And I've seen that strategy.
Take advantage of the fleece free.
Take advantage of the fleece free.
For sure.
I just had a couple of points on what we've talked about here. I had a suspicion that something was going to happen with his copy of Vlad. And the reason why is because on Saturday, Bryant and Oregon State finalized a deal where Oregon State sent Vlad to Bryant. And Eric, if you're still watching, I didn't put this on the list of trades to talk about, but Vlad in return for Ryan Pepio, Andrew Painter, Cash Mayfield, and Ricky Tiedemann, which I think that's a better return than what Northwestern got even. But then in the chat comments, Alfredo had kind of made a mention that another copy could move or something along those lines. I would have to go find that comment.
I was actually briefly in discussions with him about Vlad, but he didn't really give me a ton to go off of personally. So I kind of wound up just moving on from that. But he was discussing moving Vlad in private conversations throughout the week. So I'm just kind of surprised this is the value he ended up with, I guess is my thought.
Yeah. And what actually, I'm going to get pretty pissed about it, because like what makes me angry about the instant decision to rebuild is survey the scene a little bit. Like Northwestern right now is 4-6. So I get that, like, you may think if you go to that cumulative standings page, 4-6 is going to be pretty far down the list, but they're one game out of making the conference tournament in the Big Ten, in the big conference. So, and that's with having lost 4 games since Alfredo took over.
It's
they're right in the conference race. Like, I think too many folks are bailing on the attempt to win a conference championship or to get into that conference term. If you were in a standard 16-team league and 8 teams made the postseason, those teams in 9, 10, 11 would be trying to get in the playoffs. And that's what this league is. We're a collection of 8 different leagues, and 8 teams are going to make the postseason for your league. So try to make the playoffs. You're right there. You're still 1 game out of the 8th position in the playoffs for that conference. Try to get there. I think that we're going to have to reevaluate some of our payouts in the off season, so that next year more people buy in to fighting for the race in their conference tournament and put more of an emphasis financially on the payouts being structured for the conference tournaments, the conference standings and that kind of thing. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but I feel like too many people are ignoring your conference standing.
I agree. And I'll give you all a great example of that. Last week, or not last week, I'm sorry, earlier last season in fantasy football, totally different sport. I know. I started 2-7 and I won my league. Things turn around, things change. Maybe you're truly unlucky. Maybe you have good players who just aren't performing. Maybe one move here or there can make things happen. You don't have to give up if it's not going well, is what I will say. And certainly, like I was saying earlier, don't do it in a panicked, have to sell now fashion, because you can sell over time. And it doesn't change much if you trade all your players now versus trading them all towards the trade deadline, or even keeping them into the offseason and figuring out what you can do in the offseason. I just think there's more flexibility than necessary to go make these types of moves now. And again, I know it's a huge league. You're probably, if you're 2-8 right now, you're probably not winning this league. But you can certainly find ways to make your money back. How many, you said the regular season is how many weeks? And we're 5, this is week 6?
Yeah, 15 weeks is the regular season, and then we go to the NIT.
We're a third of the way through.
Yeah, exactly.
In the regular season, not even the playoffs, not even the NIT, not even all these other ways you can make your money back.
Yeah, I've had guys reach out to me about players like Garcia and Bieber for down the line, and they specifically said, I might like to make a run at the NIT. And I want to have these guys as little boosts for going into the NIT and things like that. And I agree with that. It's a tough one in terms of the idea of me watching these guys come in and rebuild right away. I like the fleece free for that, but to piggyback on what JC was saying about using the fleece free, I think one of my biggest frustrations about that trade situation, just to touch on it one last time, was the fact that it happened right after fleece free. Right? Because for me, if we're just talking value, if I'm moving Vlad Guerrero and I've decided in my heart of hearts I'm moving Vlad Guerrero, you're damn sure I'm putting that in fleece free. You're damn sure I'm putting that up there and saying 40 of you, if you want Vlad, come get your boy, right? So I think the frustration of that is like, if you know you're going to move these guys, the fleece free is working as intended right now, in my opinion. It is working beautifully, whether new owners are using it as an auction tool or whether it's saving them from themselves. The fleece free is working as intended, even if it extends things a little longer. So use that. Right. And Andrew mentions here too, Penn State saying, I've reached out to some of the new owners and most of them don't give you much to go off, like JC had mentioned. And then bam, they make a huge trade that I felt like I could have beat if we had a conversation. Trust me, brother, I've been in that same situation too, because I've also had that too, where I sit there and I make an offer to somebody and they're like, well, they want my soul and my firstborn son. And then like to JC, they'll turn around. They're like, oh, 50 fab will do. Your 50 fab is actually worth more than Rams 50 fab. So you can just get away with not giving the soul. Yeah, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for me, apparently. And guys like Andrew, we can't get these owners but that's also why I like the fleece free, because realistically, right, if there's a fleece free for a player and I'm talking shit about the trade as if I wanted that player, I should have just made a better offer. Right. So outside of fleece free is where I'm kind of like frustrated, because that deal was a day after fleece free. That's tough. Right. Because it's now a matter of why wouldn't you maximize your value and your visibility on that? Put it in fleece free. You know, it's a tough one in that regard. Peter says maybe us bad teams are making you pay the good team tax. If you'd like to elaborate on that, Mr. Scarlet Knights, we'd love to know what it means. We did see in the Discord, we did have one team, UCF, post that their biggest joy is playing spoiler for some of the big teams. And I know that that's something that at least Peter specifically is feeling, because he was trying to take the O off that undefeated team. But yeah, there are some guys out there that
Kenny's,
I know.
Kenny's cracking me up, bro.
Yeah, except when you make the best offer from fleece free and then Gore gets dealt for Kyle Teal. You know, I'd love to have
Teal, by the way,
to talk about that. Would be Chris, who received that Gore. And he's still not here to talk about it.
Well, he did discuss that trade last week on the show, so you can go back and find that one.
I'll make him do it again. I don't care. This is one of those things where a trend is starting here, where if every week I have to sit here and tell Chris, how did you do this? What magic are you doing? Do you need to consider America's Got Talent? Are you working as a magician who's underappreciated and we don't realize it and you can go make a new career? What are we doing? You know, like I It's just a tough one for me going on, but it is the nature of this league. It is why this is a unique and arguably the most fun league I've been in. It's why I'm sitting here talking to you guys on air about it as if I'm a talking head on ESPN, right? It's
And then Mike says we should be able to, with a 67% vote, to vote owners into fleece-free protocol. This will be kind of along the lines of a rule change, which next month we will add a channel to each conference's. You know how you have your conference chat. We will add a channel to that conference group for rules change discussion. Rules change discussion should take place within your conference. And then voted on within your conference, and then your conference leader will bring those to the executive council or leadership of the overall league, and then we will discuss those amongst the council and determine what rule changes to implement. More information will be going out on that next month when we add those channels to your conference. Ben saying Chris was at my door.
I'm not laughing at you, Ash. I'm not laughing at you.
No,
That's why
I
I started
figured it was
laughing. I just
comments,
saw him mention that Chris was at my door trying to trade via force and threats.
And we love Chris, so it sounds like we're bagging on him tonight, but we are not.
No, that's the thing. It's the same thing I just said to JC, where it's gamesmanship and respect. Like we're playing at the end of the day, and I had this conversation with Mark too on air. At the end of the day, we are playing a game about a game. This is one of those things where I think this is really fun and I enjoy it. And that's why I'm on here talking about it. But I never want anyone to take this personally, as Peter decides to tell everybody that Chris took his wife and kids. So I don't want anyone to take this personally. I never do. And I get on here and I talk about this stuff because, again, I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence or anything like that. It's just... there's a lot to talk about here because we've got a trade a week where I've got to yell at Chris and say, what did you do? And this is what you were going to touch on before, Ash, right? I'll let you talk about this one here.
Yeah, Mike is making a comment about numerous trade offers, and I only bring it up. Mike says shouldn't require making a part-time job, sending out 50 trade offers a day, updating your block 10 times a day. The waivers run rightfully only twice. 24/7s or trades are little, and it cuts off. So I don't know what the exact rest of that is, but this is kind of along with some of the sentiment that I heard some other people take earlier today in the chat, and I just got to say it's hogwash in my opinion. And Mike, I love you as an owner, so please don't take offense to me basically kind of talking down to that point, because in my opinion, fantasy sports in general, you're constantly trying to improve your team. I don't think there's any reason. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to play in a daily league, go play weekly, because then your trades take place weekly. In a daily league, you're constantly trying to upgrade your team, trying to make it better. And somebody getting upset because others are outworking them, that's kind of on them. I mean, I can't really say it any other way. And Mike, you're taking the brunt because you made the post in the chat, but the other people were making this same point. I actually sent a message to Eric in chat today. I'm trying to find it here, or maybe it was to Rhode Island. Let's see, what did I say? Something about whining about people outworking them or something along those lines. I totally have a different opinion on that. I think that if outworking your competition is a part of real baseball, and it's a part of fantasy baseball as well.
Yes.
I think it's very simple. If you are joining, Eric makes a good point. It's a paid league. I mean, it is. And not only is it a paid league, it is a paid 128 team league. If you are joining a 128 team fantasy baseball contract, whatever you want to call it, type of league, if you're joining a league like this and not expecting degenerate fantasy baseball players, I don't know why you'd be joining it in the first place. That's what you're going to get in a league like this, is people who are degenerates, people who spend multiple hours a day trying to figure out ways to interact with different owners and improve their team. I mean, that's the beauty of a 128 team league, is how many different people we have to talk to, and the fact that there are 8 copies of any specific player. So if you're looking to target a player, you have 8 different people you can go reach out to and try to work out a deal.
Chris mentions take me to dinner first before you continue to pound me. You guys better be ready for rebuttal next week. Chris, I didn't want to have this conversation while you were on because I didn't want to put you on the spot. But I do look forward to the rebuttal next week.
What rebuttal are you gonna tell me? Like, it was a gun to my head. I had to make these deals. I mean, look,
I felt so bad about doing it.
Right,
I know you felt terrible, Chris.
I am not. I'm never. As much as I make jokes, because I make a lot of them, so it might be hard to kind of ascertain how I feel. I'm not mad at the Chris's and the JCs and the Jeremy of DBUs of the world, because you are trying to improve your team. And I respect that, because I want you to compete. I want a competitive league, and I love people who are trying to do that. And that's why that just comes out, because I know you can take it, because you've been making these deals. You're having the conversation. I know you can take it on the chin. My frustration doesn't come with you guys. It comes with the idea of, like, if somebody gets a deal like that, and then Jay sees it and says, well, I'm taking on a lot of risks. Shut up. And like it comes up with and then like, Chris, what is your rebuttal going to be? I'm not mad at you for taking a deal that benefits you, and I'll never be mad about that. It's just there's no rebuttal needed. And if you come on here and you say you're taking on a lot of risk, I swear to God, I'm going to cut you out of the podcast. But it's one of those things where don't do this to me. Like, don't put me in that situation where I have to sit there and be like, am I the idiot? No, like there's no rebuttal to be given here. It's okay. Like, you made deals that benefit your team. You've made it one last week. You made one another week too. Like, at this point, I just have to, it's like Mark says, maybe I got to go to the Chris Cardona school of how to trade, right? Because maybe there's some honey in your speech that I'm not using when I approach these guys. Maybe Andrew from PSU has got to go do the same thing. So if your rebuttal is telling us, how to make it happen, I'll listen, but there's no reason for a rebuttal. If I'm being honest, like, I'm not going to sit here and yell at JC and be like, JC, how dare you improve your team? I should be winning this league. To the point of what Ash was saying, like, listen, outworking people works in real life. It works in fantasy too. I respect these guys for going out there and working. And yes, look, I realize all of our schedules are busy. So I think Mark was talking about it. It does suck to have waivers twice a week if you don't have the magic on the trade side, right? But at the same time, that waivers twice a week has got to be a little helpful to you, because if you turn around and you say, all right, I want daily waivers, right? That's basically the same as being available for daily trades, in my opinion. If you're telling me you want
see
daily
some
waivers,
pitching streaming, have daily waivers.
Right. And like, and I do not, with the way that we already have that debate in the league, I don't want that, but
people would have 73
things,
pitchers a week.
Right. It's tough, but at the same time, like, and that's also why that's part of the biggest reason I'm against like daily waivers in the league like this. But Andrew saying next time I open a trade talk, I'm starting with Hey Handsome. I'll be honest, that's you've never opened up a trade with me that way, and that's probably why we've never had a trade, Andrew. So it would
I knew Kenny was gonna go here.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not. No, and that's with respect to what Mark was saying, though. Like, I don't I think if you're looking at daily waivers, then you have the ability to respond to the trades, and you should give it a shot. But I'm not gonna get on people for outworking me. They might have more time than me, and that's not like a backhanded insult. Like, maybe people a lot more time to the league than I might in the day, and I respect that. But at the end of the day, I mean, outworking people is the name of the game. And I do respect that. So I'm not looking for a rebuttal necessarily in that regard from Chris, right? Or anybody. Like, I'm not really saying JC, like, tell me, like, improve your team. Compete. Mark says he loves daily waivers, and he's wrong. So it's okay to be wrong, but he's wrong.
As a prospect hound, I love it because then I can scoop up prospects constantly, but it does turn into a game of streaming pitchers and
daily waivers are, in my opinion, a strong no. I'm very happy with it the way that it is.
I don't think this, mind you, this conversation's been all just like kind of like joking and stuff.
Oh, for
this
sure.
This league will never go to daily waivers. I mean, it just won't happen.
No.
Oh, that's how you keep me in the league. We're good. Streaming is a cheap man's game. Win by skill in all caps. That's how you take a stand.
I'm
out
with
there,
you, Kenny.
I like it. We
have some other things to discuss in this podcast, though, do we not?
We have so many comments too.
I think we're gonna be here till
we haven't
midnight.
touched the top 25.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
That, and I
It
think
is
it's
not, Jim.
Ash has been watching like too much of Steve Dangle on the hockey side, and he's kind of hoping I crash out so you can put me on YouTube and just be like, oh, this is our guy crashing out. And believe me, I came back to Ram raging like the Knicks missed 45 threes last night. The Knicks did not miss 45 threes. The Boston Celtics missed a playoff record 45 threes. That's damn right. The Knicks came into Boston and took that lead. But the Knicks will only see mention on the New York Hour because I am not going to sit here and take another hour here and rant about the Knicks, right? We need a separate show for just trades, as Eric says. I gotta
believe that has been suggested.
I'm starting to get there, man. I'm starting to get there because you could give me. I could talk about these trades all day, and yeah, Jim, don't worry. I promise. I'm saving that talk for the New York Power Hour. I'm not gonna bother anybody with the Knicks as much as I'd like to right now, especially because they might lose on Wednesday before I got to talk again. So I'm not gonna talk too much trash, but. No, it's we might have to do it because we just got an hour of bullshitting, and I've talked a lot, and I know you want me to have a crash out clips, but sir, we have stuff to talk about. We have real things, real trades of fake men.
It's been hot. It's been hot in the league this week, especially the last 24 hours. So definitely been interesting. And the trades, we have actually discussed having a second show just to talk about trades at times. So that has been discussed in the Discord. Kenny mentioned that the Oilers puck drop in less than an hour. Yes, I know. I
think you might still be here. I don't know.
We might. But you did talk about the top 25, and I do think that our audience wants to see what that new top 25 looks like. So let me go ahead and get that pulled up here. Sorry, I'm in the wrong tab. Top 25 rankings, and I got to share my screen. Oh, that's not the right. No, that's not the right one.
No, we're back on standings, which is okay.
Yep, here we go, guys. Top 25. We've got Dallas Baptist still atop the top spot for the 6th week in a row, followed by Butler, Cal, Santa Clara, Florida International at number 5, Rhode Island number 6, LSU, Kansas State, Baylor, and Tennessee round out the top 10. Thoughts on this, JC?
You forgot number 11, dude. Come on.
I get the top 10.
I get the honor of being number 11 and being left out.
Which
honestly, I'm pretty happy
with. I promise.
I've slid just a bit. I think I was number 7, and then I was number 9, or number 6, then number 9, and now I'm number 11. So going the wrong direction, but hanging in there. So I'm not too mad about that. With that being said, it does feel like there's a lot of continuity, and I think it would be neat because I don't off the top of my head know what everybody's placement was last week. It would be cool if this graphic almost had last week's placement on it as well. I think that's something. I think that's something we could potentially add on there just to make it a little bit easier to see how people are moving. But I think what we are seeing here is a very clear taking shape of a lot of the top teams in the nation. I mean, a lot of these names that you're seeing in the top 25 we have some new ones for sure, but a lot of these are mainstays. And I mean, the top 10, 15-ish doesn't feel like it's experiencing a ton of movement at this point. Movement within that group maybe, but not a lot of new teams, at least from what I can tell. And it'll be interesting because as we get later in the season, I mean, Penn State had a rough week. Lost to league averages barely. I very nearly lost to league average, and yet the slide's only down to 11 and 12. Like, I think we're definitely seeing a certain level of stability to these rankings that we weren't seeing earlier this year.
I agree. Those top 10, 15 teams has kind of stayed the same group several weeks in a row. You did see Oregon finally drop out of the top 25. They kind of hung around. Which I believe they have 4 losses now. So, they hung around the top 25 for a long time after a hot start. I believe they were one of the top 2 or 3 scoring teams the first week or two, but then have struggled since then. So they've kind of fallen out. And then you see the ACC bringing up the rear of the top 25 with East Tennessee State, Army. I'm glad to see Army in the top 25. I think they were in others receiving votes last week, but I'd have to see it to be certain. And then Clemson at 25. Ram, your thoughts?
Yeah, I see Northern Colorado Bears snuck their way back into 21 there. They are, I think, a team that has been constantly underrated because they're, I think, like top 5 and top 6 in scoring or something right now. They've been killing it, actually, points-wise. So sneaks in there, and you can tell where some little differences are made. You know, DBU, of course, is up there with Butler as 1 and 2. They're both undefeated. But Rhode Island and Kansas are 6 and 8. So you've still got a lot of people respecting Cal, Santa Clara, and of course, Chris's team, Florida International, there as guys that can do some damage. I've gone 4-0 in 2 weeks and moved up 1 spot. So it's also tough, like just about anywhere, I think, on the top 25. Some drops that I saw this week, Indiana State go ahead the fact that they were undefeated and they took that loss to Rutgers. As I was talking earlier, I knew they would see a drop. I didn't know if it would be that significant a drop because they were undefeated going into this week, but they took the loss to both the league average and to Rutgers. Penn State is an interesting one too, as much as I'd like to mess with Andrew, but last week Andrew was on here asking about when his top 3 was coming on, and we were talking about that beforehand, right? And then now you've got Penn State dropping down to 12 because they had a rough week. So although there's a lot of stability in terms of the teams that are here outside of maybe the last 3 or 4 at the back end, right? The movement is starting to show some shifts about where people feel, and it's reflective of that most recent week. And I know that Chris has mentioned this before on the podcast, and I do want to tell people to quell that. You know, it's okay to, just because someone had a bad week, you know, doesn't mean that they're necessarily worthy of dropping 4 or 5 spots. But yeah, I respect the fact that they're at least willing to pay attention to that movement. But Penn State dropping fully out of the top 10, I think, is a tough one for me because I do think they still have a really strong squad. They just had a rough week, and we'll see what comes of it going forward. But yeah, a lot of these teams, I mean, I think outside of Northern Colorado sneaking in, I mean, we're looking at the same things here. East Tennessee State Buccaneers, very divisive squad. I saw some people drop them out of the top 25. And they had stormed on last week. I think they had jumped on into like the like before 20s, like 17 or something. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but East Tennessee State was undefeated before at some point too, and they've seen a little drop. They may see their spot, and the ACC gets an interesting low amount of love when it comes to even the conferences here. They've got 4 teams here in the top 25 now, but I get the feeling based on the validity of these changes, we might see them drop back out, maybe due to even no fault of their own going forward.
I have to give a little bit. I'm sorry, Ash.
Go ahead.
Okay, real quickly, I have to give a little bit of love to a couple teams that aren't quite as represented as maybe should be right now. Binghamton is in the others receiving votes, 7-3, not the best record, but not a bad record at all. And a team that is top 20 in the nation in points scored. That's the type of team where if you keep it up very shortly, could very easily see themselves in the top 25. Another team that's been performing all season that gave me my first loss of the season is Georgia Southern, who has a really, really nice squad and a very high scoring squad that I personally think is really well built, but has been very unlucky. Despite having like the 16th most points in the nation, is 6-4. So some bad luck for Georgia Southern there. That's the type of team where I think the roster and the production might not quite match the ranking right now. And I think if you are a team who is maybe not all season you've been performing, but you're starting to perform now, or if you're one of those teams that just feels like you might be flying under the radar, we're still only about a third of the way through the regular season. There's a lot of time for things to change. I will say that.
I'm going to echo that too, by the way, because I did not have, and this is no disrespect to Army, this is just a preference thing, but I did not have Army in the back end of my top 25. I did have the Georgia Southern Eagles because I do think their team is a little bit underrated. I do think there's some firepower there. I've seen Binghamton in my own division. I think that they're a little bit running under the radar because of the fact that the Big East has also, I mean, Rhode Island and Butler are undefeated right at the top of that division. And then you've got my own team, the UConn Huskies there, and Bryant Bulldogs are also doing well too. So there's some crowded conferences that are starting to look a little top heavy with some of these teams. And Binghamton is definitely, I think, whatever the opposite of a beneficiary would be. They're kind of just hard luck losers in certain cases. Chris out there, shout to me and Ash for sticking with Army. I don't think Army's a bad team. I see Peter speaking on behalf of Rutgers saying, sorry, Varno, I moved you down almost 10 spots. You know, so that's a rough slide for the, I don't know.
Peter's not one of our voters, so.
No, his team is Rutgers, so he's saying that his
okay.
team
Because he beat Indiana State.
Yeah,
Right.
he's saying that, and Peter's got that, of course, the accursed Mets stack, which somehow decided to work in tandem for a week there for the poor guy. I know you highlighted Santa Clara moving up too. Santa Clara, of course, has been moving up, yes, consistently throughout the season, and now they're in that top 5, and so Santa Clara is absolutely going to be a powerhouse going forward. We mentioned when we talked about the Buttermaker too. We're starting to see that consistency. I don't think we're going to see any huge significant changes after another 2 weeks. These teams are going to get solidified. It's just going to be a ranking of where do you want your team, where do you rank them, 15, 20, or not at all. So
yeah, I've had East Tennessee State I still have them in the mid-teens in my top 25. I've got all 4 of these ACC teams ranked. I've had them ranked all season. I think that they're better than what they're being given credit for. One thing I would mention is that if you look at this graphic out of this collection of 30 teams, there are a lot of these teams that have made very little trades. So just to piggyback on what we were talking about earlier, you either have to draft well, work the wire well, or trade well. If you do one of the 3, you can compete in any league. And these teams that have constructed a good roster through the draft, there's nothing wrong with not being super active in the trade market if you built a good team through your draft and through your claims and drops and that kind of thing. So I think that I think that these are just evident of the fact that you don't have to do like some we're talking about and make it a part-time job just to make trades. You don't have to do that. I'd say half of these 30 teams have not been super active in the trade market.
Yeah, and to the rankings, of course, I always want to remind people these are subjective based on the voters, and I love to hear if you feel like your team is not being respected. You know, I still had Temple Owls up there after they had talked about not being ranked. They jumped into the rankings. Temple had dropped out. They're still in the back end of my top 25. I think they're worth voting. Speaking for myself, there are some voters who don't even view UConn as a top 25 ranked team, and they're allowed to be wrong, of course. But there are some voters out there who are using.
We would never have any bias on this show, you know.
Yeah, you know,
of course not.
But I like to hear it a lot, and not for the sake of banter and arguing, but I'm willing to listen. If you make a case and you tell me, listen, my team should be top 25, and you're not on there, like you're on the show and you comment, and you said, like we just talked about this with like Georgia Southern Eagles, you know, as JC said, I think Georgia Southern Eagles should be a top 25 team, right? If they came on there and said, listen, hey, my team's not getting the proper love, that's the point of this. You know, we are doing subjective rankings to talk. I saw that Mike mentioned here on a comment, are there 8 at large besides the 2 from each conference in the championship tournament? Will it be from these rankings? Remember, this top 25 is not ranking you for the payout in the tournament. This is us having a little fun and talking here.
Yep.
Right? So
exactly.
when we do these top 25 discussions, I want to remind everybody, subjective, willing to debate and have discussion on it. That's why we're doing the show, but it will not affect it. So just because somebody wants to be wrong and not rank UConn in the top 25, as preposterous as that is, it doesn't mean it'll affect me in a negative way when it comes down to it. So I won't take it personal because they're allowed to be wrong. It's a free country. And if, again, that's what I'm saying, though, this is for debate. So if you turn around and, you know, JC's sitting there right out of the top 10 and in his head, he's above DBU. Right, so you know you've got a situation where subjectivity.
That might not be what's going on in my head. Not quite, anyway.
Next year, where's the comp next year? We're looking at next year. What is this? Where's the confidence, JC?
My team is set up beautifully for next year. I think if we had future rankings, I might be number 1 in those. In this year rankings, I'm not sure I'm quite there.
That's what I want to hear. That little and to do you think there's, and we don't have everyone on the voter squad here, Ash, but I will throw this to you. We talk about the top 25 as the current rankings. Do you think there are some people who look at the overall future of that team and use that to factor into their top 25 voting? Because I've noticed that in some of the squads where I think they've mentioned, hey, some people don't look at the prospects or things that might be coming up. You think some people might think about that? Like, oh, what do you think this team is going to be in a year? And maybe I'll give them extra credit because of that. I don't vote that way, but I'm curious if you think anyone does it.
I'm not sure. I know Mike actually uses a formula. If Mike wanted to hop on and let us know what his formula is that he utilizes, because I know he built an actual formula that basically does his top 25. Jim actually mentioned that the rankings are updated on Fantrax. As always, check out the rankings on Fantrax and make sure there's no errors. I know sometimes if a team drops out, sometimes we forget to change that. So definitely double check our work, because anything that's manual can have a mistake. Mike is asking, I thought that, but what are they at large? I guess I could read the rules. Just real quick, I'll go over that. I mean, obviously you mentioned before that you have 2 teams from each conference, compose 16 of the 24 teams that go to the national tournament. And then there's 8 spots remaining for at-large bids. The way that works is the first 4 in that last group of 8, the first 4 will be allocated according to the best overall record among all teams not in the field. Those 4 will get into the tournament. And then you still have 4 spots remaining. And that will be determined by the 4 teams that have the highest 0.4 total from the regular season. Those will also get in. So there's different ways to get into the tournament. Andrew mentions, I get why I dropped, but there were teams that lost last week and didn't fall. I lose to the elite league average by 4 points in a week where my pitching was comically bad, and I dropped 7 spots. I tend to not have too much movement in my rankings. Teams kind of move a little bit up if they, say go 2-0, a little bit down if they go 1-1, maybe a little bit bigger drop if they're 0-2. So I can't speak for everybody else and how they vote. But that's how I do it. Ram, what kind of criteria do you use on moving teams up or down?
Am I allowed to expose? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Am I allowed to expose your placement of the Penn State Nittany Lions last week, Ash?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think Andy's gonna like it too much. You had Penn State at 19, so I would say that is lower than I would have expected.
This week I have them at 19.
Yes.
Yeah. Last week, let me pull up. I'll find out what I had them last week. Go ahead, Ram.
Yeah, I'll say that I sometimes like to treat this as a momentum thing, where I grew up reading a lot of those power rankings for teams, right? And part of that was the momentum where, yes, you might sit there and say, hey, this is the best squad on paper, but you like to see the momentum that's coming. So I do live for a little bit of movement and leeway in my rankings, because I think that's part of the fun. It's part of the conversation. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to drop Penn State from like 3 to like 20, right? But might I bring them from like 6 to like 10? Will I do 4 spots or something for something like that? Like, yeah, because in reality, right, if the Mets are the power rank 1 team and they get swept by the worst team in the league, you do use that against them. And it's real life stuff versus fantasy baseball, of course, right? But you've got to have a little fun with it, I think, in the sense of like, hey, are we losing to the league average? Something I've discussed with Chris behind the scenes, and I'll say it here. One thing that I might use to drop my rankings, or some things I do behind the scenes, I think if you lose to the league average, it's a lot worse than losing to a team. Because the idea is like, my team has struggled, right? But I have not lost to the league average. And that's part of the reason I think I have at least an above average squad, because I am beating the league average every week. Seems like sound logic to me. So if I watch a team lose to the league average, we all have bad weeks, but is our bad week so high and low? I'll give you an example of a team that was in the top 25 early, and Teddy's North Central Cardinals. They were on the extremes of high scoring and low scoring, right? And they got a high ranking because of their potential, but quickly got dropped out of the top 25 because their low weeks were below league average and they were losing. So for me, if I look at you losing to the league average, I will sit there and say, hey, that you, because it's different that, I've joked about a lot here already with Rutgers, but they had an elite week, right? So anybody could have lost that week. But losing to the league average means everybody couldn't have had an elite week. There are people underperforming. So one of the heaviest ranks for me in terms of momentum, if you lose to the league average, I might reconsider my thoughts on your team, at least for the week. And you might see a move in that regard because of that. I am open about that.
And I did get my rankings from last week pulled up because I do save mine each week. I did have Penn State at 19 last week as well. So Penn State did not move in my personal rankings. I did have 2 teams drop out of my top 25, Grand Canyon and Georgia Southern. And Grand Canyon probably had the biggest fall of any team in my rankings from week to week this season. Last week I had Grand Canyon at 15 and dropped them completely out of the top 25 this week because they went 0-2 and they scored 400 points last week. So I was heavily critical on that. And they're 6-4 on the season now.
They're trading while we're on podcasts right now, and I do want to say, by the way, that if anybody's trading on podcasts and you're not watching the show, shame on you. Shame on you if you have time to work the phones to make a deal while us hardworking men are out here talking about your teams, and you don't have the wherewithal to call in or come talk to us or listen. This is going on mid podcast. It looks like a big man just got moved. I'll say that much.
Well, and this is in fleece free. This is in fleece free.
It's not getting beat. I'm just saying that right now. It's JT's side. Nobody's offering him more than that. We don't need fleece free for that trade, I don't think.
I'm actually kind of surprised because Tennessee is right in the hunt too.
Well, he's trades for 2 seniors. So yeah. That's the logic behind that trade, even if we don't like it, which clearly
I'm not a big believer personally in Gonsolin. He was kind of bad his last full season. So I don't know. I know he had a really good season or good start the other day, but I'm just not a huge fan. He's always had control issues. Are
you able to throw the trade up on the screen real quickly? Just so we
can
I don't know if you can do that.
This. Yeah, I can actually.
Poor Mark out there saying, should I not offer Roki anymore? By the way, I think that's a tough one because those are one of those. It's a polarizing situation with Roki Sasaki, by the way, right? Because there are a lot of people who value him a lot. We're getting this up here. We're gonna see all the Ashes notifications too. This is fun, but I'm just messing with you. Don't worry.
So yeah, we have a sophomore Garrett Crochet and senior Jordan Hicks for Tony Gonsolin and Hunter Green. And here's just real quickly my thought process. Let's say Hunter Green and Garrett Crochet are both great players having great seasons. And even if you value them probably about the same, which I probably value Crochet a little bit higher, but I think it's close. That's 1 year of elite for 3 years of elites, potentially 4. You can't consider red shirts when it comes to trades, at least in my opinion. I don't think you can really factor.
I totally agree
with confidence, but at the same time,
Tennessee probably has a lot of good seniors.
He does, right? I would think that at the end of the day, Hunter Green might be a redshirtable player, and Crochet, who knows, in 3 years could potentially be redshirted as well. Both those guys are definitely redshirt caliber players. At the same time, you are looking at a deal where, I mean, even if you believe Tony Gonsolin is a more valuable senior than Jordan Hicks, which is an agreement, there's an opinion I probably would agree with, although I think it depends on how you feel about Gonsolin. That's a lot of years of control to lose for a lateral move with one pitcher at best, probably, and then a probably upgrade for this year, sure. But I don't know. That seems like that's an interesting. At the end of the day, people are going to make moves in this league based on their own perspectives and their own opinions on stuff. And I think a lot of the time we get a lot of trades that there's 128 people, and a lot of people aren't going to agree with the perspectives of one owner.
I love how committed you are to being diplomatic at times, JC. I really do respect that. I think that
I'm a professional.
To have a good, it's a good dynamic. Because I, on the other hand, am not a professional, I agree with you 100%. Where there's no fleece free needed here, baby. Nobody's beating the sophomore Garrett Crochet and Jordan Hicks for Gonsolin and Hunter Green. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's no way that Hunter Green is outdoing Garrett Crochet so badly that you want to go, because I think you take Gonsolin and you take Hicks out of this, you're giving up 2.5 years of Garrett Crochet for half a year of Hunter Green. You could this is also another one where it's just, why are we giving up 2.5 years of Garrett Crochet for half a year of Hunter Green and a pitcher at that? Man, these guys' arms could explode tomorrow. It could explode tonight if he breathes on it wrong. What are we doing? What are we? This is not one of those things where, and it's obviously there's some risk with Crochet, just not even in the fact that he's a pitcher, but he's obviously maximizing his arm usage. I understand. MVP move taking the heat off Chris. There is no heat off Chris. This is but I don't know what it comes down to here, where again we just talked about this. There was no pressure to move Crochet at a discount. I like Hunter Green too. I'm a big Hunter Green fan, but he's also a high max effort arm. Something could happen there. Like I said, I'm glad JC's the professional about it, because I, on the other hand, am not.
If I was a Garrett Crochet owner in this situation, if I was Tennessee, this is again just my perspective, and I wanted Hunter Green, I would have reached out to every single Hunter Green owner and seen if I can get more on top of Hunter Green, even a senior, junior, whatever. You can find more.
And one that's not in fleece free.
Yeah, exactly. But in general, you can absolutely find more for Garrett Crochet than this. I would be putting Garrett Crochet on the trade block. I'm very open to trading Garrett Crochet. Give me your best offer. Let's talk. You can get more. Hunter Green's a great player. You can get more than half a year, as Ram said, or 3/4 of a year, however you want to look at it, of Hunter Green and a non-guarantee in Tony Gonsolin for Garrett Crochet.
Yeah, I mean, we could split the middle and say like 2/3, right? Because I think you said we're about a third of the way through the season. Yeah. I see
exactly a third.
We're a third way through the season. I just think, and you do this well, JC. I'll give you the compliment on this. You will immediately, if you've decided you're going to trade a guy, you'll hit the trade block. I don't care if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and you'll throw up and you'll be like, "Hey, I got this guy on the block. I'm looking for this." Not only you put the guy on the block, but you tell people what you're looking for. And I like that about you because that's the best trade block post. I'm moving this guy. I want to move him in this time frame. This is what I'm looking for. Let's talk. And then you start reaching out to people, and that's the way it should go. So that's also part of my issue with the process. There's no reason, in my opinion, for you to move that sophomore stud without taking discussion from the rest of the league. That you're just hurting yourself. And then you're hurting the league because you're ruining the value of a certain player. We talk about this Jordan Baz stuff and have a little fun, but it's getting tough in this case. But yeah, and I'll echo that. I don't think the fleece free is needed. I saw Mark turn around and say, "I'm going to offer Gunner." I know he's just saying that to have a little fun with us. I'm sure. I don't think he's offering a sophomore Gunner for a senior Hunter Green here, but. I love you, Bryce. I appreciate you. I'm also terrified to receive compliments on air because I feel like it's a dangerous thing if people actually agree with me if I'm supposed to be the danger guy in here. Hot take, but I think I'd take the Crochet side. Yeah, I
boiling hot. That's really.
I do kind of want to point out that Mike mentioned the East Coast bias. Crochet is not going to hold up once he reaches his career high in innings. I do think that's a fair worry. And so that is something to be considered here. So I did want to make sure we gave Mike his kudos on that point, because I do think that's something that could be considered moving farther into the season. Pierce, we have not even gotten to the trade slides yet. I'm not totally sure we're going to tonight, just because we're an hour and a half in, and we have talked a lot of trade talk, even though we didn't bring up any specific trades on the slides that I had tonight. So we'll see if we get to them or not. We do have there is one Tulane trade on my slides. So if we get to that, we will definitely touch on it. Innings is 100% a factor. Exactly. So that was a good point by Mike. I hope Kenny's joking when he says a 4-minute high stick, because that would really annoy me about now. So please,
he turned around. And
he's trolling. There's no way. I don't
know.
I think
don't worry
he's trolling.
About the Oilers, says Jim, but we'll check that. I'll give you a live breakdown in a second, because my Leafs are actually surviving somehow for once. Kenny says he's not joking, by the way, and we'll double check that in a moment. It is 1-0 Vegas right now. He is not lying. So, but even if the innings are a fear for that trade, by the way, because we're going to lead into talking about trades anyway, right? If you look at it where, let's say, Crochet's arm blows out or Green's arm blows out, you've lost all your value there. Green's gone. Crochet recovers, you're still going to get a year and a half or a year and 2/3, right? So just in terms of like straight value, we don't need to be giving up cents on the dollar here. There's no reason. There's no salary on this league. There's no pressure on it, outside of like some guys have mentioned, like Ben, that Chris is coming to their door and threatening them and things like that. Kenny, I'm going to need you to stop, because you're stressing out Ash on air, and it's going to become the me and JC show.
We're going to have a dangle.
Yeah, if you're going to, we can't. So why don't we move into something fun for you, Ash? Let's talk about the trades. Let's put the trades up that you thought you wanted to talk about. Let's get JC in his specialty here. Let's knock it out. Let's move forward.
I will convince y'all how every trade is a win for both teams. I can do it.
All right, let's see here.
No, you try that. You try that crap with me on all your trades, JC, and every time I'm like, I'm not buying that BS, man. Bring it somewhere else.
The first one that I got here is Rhode Island and Colorado School of Mines. The site I always find the logos for did not have a logo for Colorado School of Mines, so they do not get the benefit of having that. But Colorado School of Mines is going to receive a freshman Shane Baz. Man, freshman Shane Baz is looking pretty good right now. A freshman Pete Crow Armstrong and a freshman Abimelech Ortiz, JT's Abby Bombs, as we like to call him, ranked number 208 by the Upside Prospect, because that's who we use when we put the number there for the prospect rankings and the deals. Shout out to Lucas, does a great job with the Upside Prospect. I highly encourage everybody to check him out. And he is in our Discord if you want to tag him sometime. It's at Upside something. I'm not sure exactly what his handle is, but Rhode Island in this trade is receiving a junior Kyle Schwarber and sophomore Zach Wheeler. What do you think, Ram?
We got a lot of value moving around here, actually. I'm not too mad about this one. I love Abby Bombs. I know that he hasn't really come to fruition in terms of what he was supposed to be on his little hype train. JT was one of the guys that brought me on to Abby Bombs, him and Parsless and all that, meeting you there, Ash. So I have a soft spot for Abby Bombs and there. So we got 4 years of Baz and 4 years of PCA, and we got 2 years of Kyle Schwarber and 3 years of Zach. Or if we put the halves in, it's 3 2/3, 3 2/3, and 1 1/3 and 2 1/3 here. I like this for Rhode Island.
That sounds like some freaking Steiner math, right?
I'll do it if you want me to. I'll break it down right now. But Rhode Island's getting a year and 2/3 of Kyle Schwarber and 2 2/3 of Zach Wheeler. So he's getting Zach Wheel. And he's given up 3 2/3 of Baz and 3 2/3 of PCA. I actually think this one's closer to even than I want to make it out to be. I do think this is pretty solid because PCA is a guy that I would sell high on. I don't know if he's going to sustain this type of pace. And Baz is somebody in this league that is a bit of a meme, but he's also had a really hot start to the year overall. Schwarber's going to get you those points as a utility bat, and Zach Wheeler is pretty much as consistent as can be. So I like this one for both sides. I'm not too angry about it, if I'm being honest.
I pretty much agree with what he said. I think realistically, this is the type of trade you're probably applauding for the most part, as like a pretty well-balanced trade. A team in Rhode Island who's definitely more going for it, loses a little bit of years of control, but gets the guy in Zach Wheeler who is, like Bram said, as consistent as they come. He's going to put up 35 points to start every single start for this year, next year, and the year after that in all likelihood. Even though he's 35, he's extremely consistent and doesn't show signs of really slowing down. Pete Crow Armstrong, as a former Shane Baz owner and a former Pete Crow Armstrong owner, both of those guys have been great for me, and I've traded them both for good value because, in large part, I don't quite expect them to keep up the production that they're putting up. I think they're both very good players. I loved owning them. I would love to still own them. But I think probably sold a bit high on those guys. At the same time, that's a good return for Colorado School of I don't know.
The minors. They're just minors. We're talking about minors.
The minors. Pause.
The children yearn for the mines.
Okay, then.
I like the return for Colorado School of Mines as well. I do. I think this is a pretty good return. 2 really talented players, a prospect who has some potential still, even if he hasn't met it yet. It's a pretty even trade. I like this one. I
hate the Phillies, so I'll take Colorado School of Mines. That's my analysis. I hate rooting for Phillies.
I support it. Plus, we're rooting against Rhode Island in that way. So,
Peter says Zach Wheeler, the pitcher who gave up a home run to the GOAT, Brett Beatty. On brand there, Peter. On brand. Anybody else in the chat have a comment on that trade? I'll put. Andrew's going to say Phillies with the W. I can't stand the Phillies. Like, I know that people think Braves and Mets are the rivalry. I hate the Phillies. I'm still holding grudges from '93. We should have made the World Series that year. But instead, we were out of gas after chasing down the Giants in the regular season. Yes, the Braves were in the NL West at the time, and the Giants' 102 wins weren't enough to make the postseason. So I got to redirect the shot at our buddy Chris, the Cal owner, and remind him that 102 wins were not enough to make the playoffs that year. So, moving along. Let's see here. We've got another Northwestern trade to talk about tonight. One that I'm kind of interested in. Logan Gilbert going to Pitt as a sophomore, and a sophomore Pete Crow Armstrong. So a second Pete Crow Armstrong deal now, and he's going to Northwestern. JC, I'll let you lead us off here.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, and I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself. Obviously, there is some injury concern with Logan Gilbert that hasn't totally been resolved as of yet, but that is about as superstar of a superstar pitcher as it gets in a league that values superstar pitching very highly. There's a reason he's a sophomore, as in was drafted in the top 2 rounds. That PCA was a sophomore, as in drafted in like the 12th round or something along those lines. With that being said, PCA has been awesome, and if he continues to be a 7-point per game bat, it's a pretty reasonable trade. Realistically, PCA might be a 5.5 point per game bat, in which case I definitely lean the Gilbert side, assuming that there's no continued ramifications from the arm injury. If the arm injury were to wipe out a season and a half and all of a sudden he has some significant injury, then things change. But as of right now, that doesn't sound like what the news for Gilbert is. It's hopeful that he'll be back in the rotation in the next few weeks. So I'm giving the win to Pitt right now because I feel like he's getting the guaranteed asset, assuming health.
Ram, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to echo him on this one here. I think that obviously, like, we know exactly what's going on with Gilbert, even though the early news is encouraging that he should be fine right after the short IL stint. And there's always the risk of injury with pitcher. So in general, I mean, if you can take the sophomore bat of same level over the sophomore pitcher of that level, you would, right? Because consistency and you feel a little bit safer. That being said, as JC mentioned before, when we're talking about PCA, I do not expect him to keep doing exactly what he is doing, and I think Logan Gilbert has a better track record in a league that values the upper echelon of pitching. I'm giving this one a Pitt. It's not a robbery or anything crazy where I'm going to go on a rant or something like that, but I do think that if you gave me the choice, I'd take that sophomore Logan Gilbert.
I agree. Because whenever this trade went down, it was actually a day before, I think, the injury. So you kind of, in my opinion, you have to kind of evaluate the trade as of the moment it went down. There's no way I would have traded Logan Gilbert for a single player, a single player of that caliber, I should say. Not in our format, not with the way the market values pitching. I couldn't do it. So I love Pitt's side. Even though Northwestern's getting what has been a very productive player in the early part of the season. So my opinion here is Logan Gilbert by a landslide. But feel free to prove me wrong, Pete Crow Armstrong and the Cubs, as we move forward with this season. But we have some more trades to break down. And one of our favorite members of the league, Chuck and UCF, is going to receive a junior Bryce Miller and a senior Alec Boehm. In return for Oklahoma State is going to get a senior Matt Chapman and a junior Jack Leiter. Ram, what do you got?
Bryce Miller is the point of this that kind of pisses me off because I really like Bryce Miller. And I think that he's been really uneven this year to the point where I'm starting to doubt my own understanding of Bryce Miller and wonder if he's ever going to really break through to be the super consistent high-end guy, or if he's just going to keep showing me flashes of potential and not really put it together. Because if I look at this deal, I always try to find the player that says, oh, this is the best player in the deal, right? So for me, that might have been Bryce Miller. And I look at that and I say, okay, you're getting 2 years of Bryce Miller, or at least the longer contract of Bryce Miller. You were giving up Jack Leiter, who's got his own questions. I think Chapman's better than Boehm, but they're not so far apart that I would sit there and say that, oh, that changes the deal in one way or another. I want to say tentatively that I like the UCF return because I want to believe in Bryce Miller. But it really comes down to what you think. If you think that the Bryce Miller we saw in flashes of greatness is going to be that guy, then it's UCF far and ahead. If you're out on Bryce Miller, then I think this is fine to be able to get Chapman and Junior Leiter. You might be more interested in the upside of Leiter than Miller, and I'm okay with that. I think, as JC was saying, this is one of those relatively fair-ish trades that you want to see where it looks to be even-ish, and I'm okay with that. I guess based on my bias, I'll take the Bryce Miller side right now because I think there's still some upside now. But honestly, in a month, you might even hear me say something different because I'm close to losing my confidence in Bryce Miller.
I think this is a trade that is very, I agree with what Ram said. I think it's kind of up in the air right now. I think if we look at this trade in 3 months, our opinion could be very strongly the OSU side wins this trade, and also very strongly the UCF side wins this trade. Because if Leiter continues to struggle with some of the control stuff that has plagued him at times, then, and Bryce Miller all of a sudden is a 35 point per game arm, like he seems to have the potential to be, and at stretches certainly is, or has been in the past anyway, all of a sudden you could look at this and go, oh yeah, this is definitely a big win for UCF. But there is also the possibility that Leiter kind of figures it out a bit more in line with the way his first couple starts of the season looked. His stuff is great. He's got great fastball velo. Just there are some areas for him that need to improve for sure. But I like Chapman over Bohm. Obviously, so far this season, Chapman's been a lot better. I think Bohm's going to continue to improve, and that will be a closer gap between those two come into the season. Like if you look at their points from now to the end of the season, I would bet it's probably relatively close. I think Bryce Miller's still definitely probably more of a sure thing still, so I'm going to agree and take the UCF side, but don't know. It's one of those trades that is close enough to not be ridiculous at all.
Bohm did his first home run of the season tonight, as Ty pointed out in the chat. So I think that you might be right, JC, as an Alec Bohm owner in multiple leagues. Actually, I know I hate the Phillies, but I do have several copies of Alec Bohm, and I've always been a fan of his. I do think the rest of the season he's going to be much better than he's shown so far this season. I like Bryce Miller there. Jack Leiter's been kind of inconsistent. I like the UCF side. The only question that I have about UCF in this deal, and I'd have to go check his roster to see, but trading for two upperclassmen when you are 13th in your conference and well out of the playoff picture in a very, very tough, difficult Big 12, to me, I'm not sure that I would have done it. Of course, you're trading away two upperclassmen, so maybe you could still flip those guys if you.
UCF was the guy who said that he wanted to play spoiler to the big team.
Yes,
Chuck was specifically the guy who said when they questioned this trade, they asked him, and he said, "Listen, I want to be able to cause some issues for these teams and still play spoiler," and that could be, his fun use of $50. We've got guys on even this pod, who says they hate the Phillies and they insult Schwarber and Wheeler, but then they compliment Alec Bohm of all people. I'm just saying, there's some confusing takes out there. If you're gonna like anybody,
I'm full of hypocrisy, Ram.
If you're gonna like anybody on the Phillies, if you hate them, you might as well like the productive guys. If you're going to bat for Alec Bohm, I mean, what's next, right? Are we gonna go out there for Sir Anthony Dominguez? Or are you gonna start talking about a Ryan Kerkering's 80 grade name and say, I like him because he's got a nice name, but I can't stand Zach Wheeler because he's good at baseball. You gotta pick a side here, Ash. If you hate the Phillies, hate them. He's
a fan of the struggling Phillies. He's probably a huge Ryan Kerkering fan. He's a huge fan of the struggling Phillies.
Maybe this is why I like Bohm. The Phillies fans don't even like him, so I might as well.
And Bohm doesn't like him back. Bohm hates it there. And then true to Philly culture, they turned it into a goddamn T-shirt where they said, "I hate it here," and made a whole thing out of it. So this is I guess it makes sense, right? If the Phillies suck, then you like them because they suck. But when they do good and they beat the Braves, you hate them. Is that the logic? Is that the unbiased take we're going with here, Ash?
When you're in a deep league, you've got to go with what you got. So I've got to root for at least one of them because they're always going to be on my roster somewhere. So I got to sidestep it.
Might as well make it a bad one.
Right. Here we go. Next one on the docket. Simeon Woods Richardson's name was too long to type. I had to reformat the slide here. But East Carolina receiving a junior, Dylan Cease, a sophomore, Simeon Woods Richardson, and a senior, Ben Brown. Man, that's been a roller coaster this year as a Ben Brown owner. And Bryant Bulldogs, is Eric still watching? Let us know, Eric, what your thoughts on your own trade was. But the Bryant Bulldogs receiving a sophomore, Brandon Fott, and a freshman, Christian Scott. I'm not sure who went first last time, Ram. Let us know what you think here.
All right, so I like Christian Scott a lot, and I think a freshman spot is a nice little pickup. What I do think is interesting here, ECU and Bryant, is that I see no reason that Bryant would need to move off for looking forward to 4 years too. It's kind of doing the same thing I was doing, where he's getting some more years out of it. He's looking for Scott down the line and a sophomore Brandon here. It could be that he's out on cease. I think that in this case, I might have wanted to. It really depends on perspective here, because if Brian has decided to do the things that I'm doing in terms of, hey, I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way this year, so I want to build a little more towards my future, I think it's fair value, right? Because you're getting a full, outside of Scott coming back from injury, you're getting quite a few years of pitching here, which is solid. A sophomore SWR doesn't move me too much in either direction. Senior Ben Brown, too, I like him, but I mean, his senior contract will be done in a couple months, so it's really Cease is the big return here. I think that if we're, again, just looking at straight value, if you believe in Dylan Cease, you're still giving up a lot. You're kind of paying up for the Dylan Cease of old and not considering he's struggled so far. So I might actually tilt this one towards Brian and say I kind of like what you're doing here in terms of extending your years. And if you're out on Cease, you're out on Cease. You're committed to it. You still got a pretty solid return.
Again, I'm pretty much in agreement with what Ram has said. I've made a few trades in line with this Bryant trade where I've traded away what is probably the better player in the deal for a younger contract or two, especially towards the beginning of the year. But still, I mean, Bryant has done a really nice job of building a roster that is competitive now and has a lot of leeway for the future with a lot of youth, which has kind of been the goal for my roster as well, is to attain a lot of freshman, sophomore contracts of current MLB players and build as competitive a roster as possible now while still having flexibility in the future. This trade does more of that. I think Fott, while not sexy, is a good player. And Christian Scott's an interesting prospect with good upside who on a freshman contract will still give you multiple years of utility. And I mean, Dylan Cease, the advanced numbers definitely reflect that he's been a bit unlucky, but also don't reflect an elite ace level pitcher. If he's a not superstar caliber player anymore, which what looks to be the case, I see this as a win for Bryant. I'm not a big Simeon Richardson guy, and Ben Brown is a roller coaster that I personally would not want to be on right now. And so I'm giving the edge to Bryant as well.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting trade. You've got two teams that are competing in their conferences. ECU is 7-3 in the American, and Bryant at 8-2 in the Big East. So it's very interesting when you get two competing teams making a deal as you get to the midpoint and beyond of the season. So I thought this was a pretty interesting deal. Dylan Cease, big reputation in the last few years, so I can see why ECU would want him. I do kind of lean Bryant on this trade just because of the fact that the ECU owner is a UK fan, which obviously, cost him a few points to begin with. But then you also have on the Bryant side, you have Christian Scott. I'm a huge Christian Scott fan. There was a lot of hype with him about a year and a half ago where he had tons of helium in the prospect community. And then he just so happened to get hurt last summer. And I think he's going to come back next year, rip roaring and playing well for Bryant. To have a couple of years there, 3 years there of production from Christian Scott. I think Christian Scott could be the best pitcher in this deal when it's all said and done. But let's see here. We've got a lot of chat. We got a lot of chat going on in the Discord. I'm like, guys, we got the show going.
The Discord also tagged you. I want to address a direct comment. I see that Andrew from Miami tagged you, and he said, that it's something along the lines of 2-0 week, take over top team in scoring in the ACC, drop 2 spots in rankings. Y'all in the committee better check your mail before opening it this week. And he tagged Ash to try to get his attention. I do want to make mention to you, Andrew Miami, that Ash might be the high man on your team. actually, based on what I remember in the voting. I think Ash is one of the highest guys on Miami. So I feel like at the end of the day that you might be attacking the wrong guy. You're still in my top 25 too. I do think you have a solid squad, but I welcome you to jump onto the YouTube and comment there because there's a lot on our screen right now. I'm not even doing this to promote the YouTube. I just want to be honest for anyone who's listening that there's so much on our screen when we do the production side of the podcast that we don't always see the Discord comments. So if there's ever stuff going on in the Discord, like I see sometimes you guys DM me during the show, I don't always see it. And I know that Ash doesn't always see it either. But if you see the YouTube comments, we get them popped up in a little bubble on here. So and we can physically highlight them on the podcast. So I do want to make mention of that. Like, please, remember, you can always call in and you can comment on the YouTube. We can throw it up here. Matt says, we'll see if Colorado made a big enough splash trade for a call out.
And I do want to mention that I did not have a Colorado trade in our analysis segment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that these are the biggest trades. They're just trades that I found interesting as I'm scrolling through from the last week. So there's no slight if you don't get mentioned during this segment. But I'm sure, Matt, keep tuning in and we will see, what your trades look like in the future. I do want to respond to Andrew live here on the show. That's the Miami Andrew owner. We have several Andrews in the league. I do have Miami higher ranked than anybody in the league. I've got Miami right now third in all of the league.
Yes.
So Miami, I do respect what you're doing, and I've had them top 10 all season. So
he has, and that's why I want to say that you're actually tagging the one of the guys who's been your staunch defender behind the scenes, and I just. By the way, Matt says moving a sophomore Judge and Harper for bets wasn't enough. If any of you are trading to get on this show, please stop. Please stop doing that.
I don't know. I kind of like it. Kudos to you.
No, because
they're working to get on the show.
I just made this speech about taking player value. You post the link every week to get on the show. You can willingly get on for free without letting yourself get fleeced. Do not trade to get on the show. Stop doing this. Don't make me crash out. I'm not approving this at all.
I don't know. I like the activity. I like the hustle. So I got to give him kudos for that. That was a good trade, Ram. Speaking of trades, we'll move to the next one here. We've got, and this will be the last one of the night, just because we're kind of running short on time. But Tulane, we did let you know that you had made the show tonight. You are receiving two seniors, Sandy Alcantara and Garrett Whitlock, and sending to Coastal Carolina a freshman, Logan Evans, who is ranked 153 by the Upside Prospect, and a senior, Michael McGreevy. JC, what's your take on this deal?
Sandy has frustrated me this season. As a freshman Sandy owner, not what I was expecting and not what I was looking for to this point in the season. Now, facing the Dodgers a couple times has not done him any favors, but at the same time, his numbers are certainly not where people expected them to be, and even the advanced numbers don't tell a super pretty story, which I'm not thrilled about. But as of right now, I'm going to hold on to the body of work with him and the past experience of being a legit ace and hope that continues, at least on a freshman contract. On a senior contract, I can understand getting rid of him. But I don't completely mind this for Tulane at all either. Like, I think if Sandy all of a sudden gets back into form over his next couple starts, I mean, he starts against the White Sox this weekend. That's the type of start that could get you going in the right direction potentially. And his stuff still seems pretty good. So I don't hate this for Tulane. I don't feel like Logan Evans is a world-shattering prospect by any means. And Michael McGreevy is, again, a senior contract as well. I think you're getting two potentially quality guys for a return that I don't think is giving up a ton. I just don't mind what Tulane's giving up much. And I think taking these shots at a couple guys to be starters and contributors down the stretch for a team that's competing is a pretty smart move, in my opinion.
Ram, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that. So unsurprisingly, I suppose here, but I'm gonna agree with a lot of what JC said. I do think that if you're looking for Sandy and Garrett, the price that you paid was not an overpay. Sandy hasn't looked so sharp that now. I know Whitlock is just kind of just being Whitlock. So at the end of the day, did you give up too much for Sandy and Garrett Whitlock? No, you didn't. I would prefer right now in my roster, just because of the way I feel about both of those guys, I'd probably prefer the freshman Logan Evans and the senior Michael McGreevy. So I'm going to say that I like that return because Sandy, in some places, you can't get anything for him right now. And I actually want to use that to throw that towards you, Ash. You have a Sandy. So I want you to kind of talk about that for a second. Like, is this a return that you would like for Sandy, or would you still have held out for more? Because I think it was still a relatively cheap price to pay based on the body of work in the past, like JC mentioned.
I feel like it's if you're in the situation that Coastal's in, I like this return because he's a team that's kind of fallen out of the race in his conference, and he could very well lose all value that Sandy has as you get closer to the deadline. So I think getting a player of Logan Evans's caliber, who I like a lot as a prospect, I think this is a win for him. I like Tulane's side as far as like trying to take the risk, and hopefully you get some huge reward as the season progresses. As a team that is in the upper half, upper third of my conference, I don't think I could do this trade just because I have to kind of roll the dice that Sandy's going to kind of rebound and get back to being Sandy, so to speak. So I think it depends on your team situation a lot in this particular trade.
I think Ash brings up a great point, though, that we've already touched on a little bit in this podcast and likely will continue to over the next few weeks. But if you are a owner of multiple valuable senior contracts, and I say valuable in that name recognition, production type guys, and you're not competing, now would be the time. You don't really want to wait. I was saying earlier in the podcast, you got time to wait if you're a rebuilding team or more on that time frame. That's not as true when it comes to senior contracts because the trade deadline is in less than 2 months, like we've talked about some. And I think you got to get a move on that with those types of guys so you can try to get yourself some sort of value, because I assume there's going to be quite the fire sale of senior players come towards the end of June.
And Scory Perry has scored for the Oilers. There we go, boys.
Congratulations.
And the crowd was wild.
As a Stars fan, I'm hoping y'all lose. So,
dude, the only NHL game I've ever been to was in Dallas. So, Stars games are a lot of fun.
They are a lot of fun, and we won in 7, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, I lived in Austin until a year and a half ago. So, or cool. A little over a year ago. Actually, about 13 months ago, I moved from Austin. So, got to do a lot of cool stuff in Texas. I miss HEB.
Yeah, they just opened. I live in the Dallas area. They just opened one in Dallas. I've only ever gotten to go to them in Austin. There's one near me now, and so HEB is great. I agree.
And I miss proper barbecue.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You're not getting that other places the way you will in Texas.
No. But yeah, I think that, that we hit on a lot of good trades tonight. I appreciate everybody for their candor in the chat. And everybody's patience with us in the league. I do have to say, though, like there was so much dialogue going on about the top 25 and different trades and different things like that in the Discord. Hopefully some of those guys will shift that conversation to the YouTube chat next week whenever we're on again at 8:30 next Tuesday. So definitely looking forward to that. Matthew says DFW represent. We have a lot of Dallas people in this league then, actually. So interesting. I was actually at the Rangers game with the Columbia owner when DeGrom got hurt last year. So maybe I'm barred from a Globe Live.
Please don't go to any more DeGrom starts then, because we need him this year.
But anyway, kind of wrapping up the evening. Ram, do you got anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, by the way, I see Andrew Miami saying have shifted. See you next Tuesday. I appreciate that, by the way, that you're going to go ahead and put. I got it. Yeah, I like that it's going on there because it's good to see you guys on there. I'll throw you here's my last thought. The league average, if you look at if you take out week 1, obviously because it's an extended week, Chris, you're lucky I'm not talking about you anymore. I see that comment. League average, if you take out week 1, has sat about 650, give or take. We saw about like 650, 630, 680, 650, right? So for owners out there, if you're trying to figure out where your team lands and where you kind of exist, 650 is about the league average for a regular week, right? If you're hitting about 700, 800 every week, start thinking about moving forward. If you're hitting 500 every week and you're a little nervous, you're under average of the league of 128 people where some teams are setting lineups, right? So use that number wisely. Think about that 650 and think, all right, my team should be hitting above 650 if I'm competing. Use that number wisely.
And be patient with your trades, especially if you're rebuilding. Be patient. There is plenty of time if you are building towards the future to get really good value for your sophomore Vlad Guerreros. So be patient. Let things come to you because they will. Yes, to him as well. Yes.
And I will wrap it up tonight. I'm assuming that was your final take, JC, or did you have anything else?
That's all I got to say. I'm glad to do it. This was my second time on the podcast, so I had fun doing this. It's always an honor to be involved in something like this, and it was good to get to debate with Ram as much as we did tonight. That was a fun time. So I had a great time. I hope y'all enjoyed yourself.
I always enjoy having you on, JC. You're welcome on not just the CBL show, any of our shows that we have throughout the week. Tomorrow night we'll have the New York Power Hour at 10:30. We haven't finalized that, but that's what we've been typically rolling with. So 10:30 tomorrow night will be the New York Power Hour, followed by Thursday night General Baseball Talk at 10. And I'm not sure if we're going to continue with the BS Hour on Fridays yet or another week. We'll see. I haven't watched it yet, but thank everybody for watching, and go Oilers. See you guys next week.
Peace.